Hello, world. Welcome to the Pocket Gamer podcast with your hosts, me, Brian Baglow, and the ever amazing. She's a player, she's a prognosticator, she is a policy expert. It's our very own Peggy and Salz. Hello, Peggy. How are you?
Oh my goodness, Brian. I'm doing extremely well now because you just showered me with compliments. But I'm home. That's one thing. And finding, as always, great content for us both. And how are you doing? I don't know what I'd call you. I think of you as the wizard, but we won't go there.
it's
Wizard,
there,
maestro, ninja doesn't quite.
there's
You're not.
there's a there's a whole musical. It's we can dig
There
into
is.
that. We'll
There
have
is.
to do an episode where every question is in the form of song. It's they did it in The Simpsons, they did it in South Park, they even did it in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So, and Buffy. Um, but we'll maybe build up to that towards the end of the year.
We will
Um,
indeed.
I'm good. I feel as though I have been buried in a big, deep black hole for the last 6 months. I have been working on this action plan as the first step in creating a national strategy for video games for Scotland, and I've finished the draft. It's out for consultation. It's hitting all of the sort of the industry and the stakeholders and everything, and so far so good. So I feel as though I can go out into the sunlight unashamedly and do things like potentially after this call, I might even switch on my Xbox, which could be the first time this year.
So you are getting back into games, getting back into enjoying them again, Brian. And that is a perfect way to get into what we're going to be talking about because it's not just about player engagement in gaming. We want to dig deep because we love this, and we want to dig in deep into the psychology of what keeps players happy. So I can't think of a better way to talk about this than our guest today. No pressure here. Joe Schaeppi, CEO of Solsten, who is on our program today, Brian, because he absolutely gets what players want.
Welcome on board, Joe. It's lovely to have you here.
We went into what you are, CEO of Solsten. We'll talk about that. But you're so into the mindset of what it takes to survive, not just in the world of game development, but yourself. You're into wilderness training. I mean, that I'm intrigued. How do you draw on that mindset, and where does that come out in the world of game development for you?
I think if you look at, most human beings, like play is an inherent part of how we grow, how we learn. It's just embedded in who we are. And I had the good fortune to like grow up as a skier and have parents that we spent a lot of time outdoors and things like that. So really like Solston in many ways was a natural almost like outcropping of just my reality. I grew up ski racing, ended up living all over the world skiing, which was just really amazing. Became an adventure psychologist. So I specialized in adventure based psychotherapy because you see the outcomes that happen in that world and how much better they are than typical cognitive behavioral therapy when we're on a couch. Just neurogenesis happens when you're in a state of play in just ways that it does not happen when you're just physically sitting or things like that. So as a part of my psychotherapy training, yeah, I have to maintain my wilderness first responder. So that's something that I got to do. So if something bad happens and it's out in the nature, you're middle of nowhere. It's a very different type of medicine than urban medicine. And when you think of play, like the highest forms of play, there's usually some element of risk that's involved. So some form of risk is an important part of play. And when you look at adventure, things like that, one of the best ways to approach risk is to be prepared for the outcomes of risk. And having something like your wilderness first responder is a great way to be prepared for fun.
Risk and fun. I like
Love
that.
it. Yeah. We talk to a lot of people on the show, Joe, who talk about putting players first, and I think one of the problems that we have is because so many people in the games industry see themselves as gamers as well. They're players too. That's why they got into the sector. They think they understand what players want without necessarily ever being able to step outside their own kind player type. Explorer, helper, griefer, whatever you happen to be. So it's always interesting when we talk to people and just sort of trying to figure out where they fit. So when it comes to games, when it comes to actually playing games, what kind of player are you?
It's a good question. I think maybe to speak to the first one, you know, people that think they're the player are absolutely not the player. Like if you have that thought,
Hmm.
then you're probably the opposite of the person.
Hmm.
You know, just because you play that game does not mean that you're a player. And oftentimes at Solsten, because we group people based on their psychology, like there's no such thing as a player type. And this is getting to my question.
Hmm.
There's literally no such thing. Like the Bartle types, that's wrong. Those were
Yeah.
made for MMO games. There's not 4 types of people in the world. Think of like Myers-Briggs, 16
Hmm.
types. There's not 16 types of people in the world. As humans, we kind of like to make things simple. We like to create buckets for stuff because it's easier for our brain. It's less cognitive load. Our brain uses a lot of glucose. And
Hmm.
so this idea of player type, it's non-existent. A good
Hmm.
example of that was we were working with Christian Segerstral on one of their games, and our algorithm is basically able to figure out the like-minded groups of people within your system. So it's kind
Hmm.
of like a real-time Harry Potter hat. It's looking at hundreds of psychological traits. And I remember Christian looking at one of the personas and going like, that one is totally me. And then when we scrolled down on our platform and we looked at the market size of that persona, there was only like 2 million people in the world that was like that group of people, which like makes total sense, right? You're Christian. You've built massive companies before and been very successful. So there's probably not very many Christians in the world. And it was just a moment where he had that aha where he was like, wait, even if I am the player, even if I am giving the feedback, I'm literally giving us feedback into a niche market. I'm excluding the bigger part of the market
Hmm.
that actually is going to allow this game to expand and grow. And so I think that's a point. And then, you know, what type of player are you? So that comes down to a lot of what we do at Solston. There's a saying in adventure psychology, which is show me how you play and I'll tell you who you are.
Hmm.
So the type of player that I am is who I am. That's
Well,
that's
Yeah.
the realest question. So to ask me that, we need to do a Solston assessment. I need to put my psychological data up here and talk about that. I'm high on openness, for example. I'm extremely high on openness. I'm really high on one of my biggest motivations, fearlessness and risk taking. So now we can start to understand how I might like to play a little bit.
Okay, that was a far better answer than my question deserved. Uh, I like this guy, Peggy. He can come back.
are you kidding? I mean, I am transfixed by this. And just saying that player types aren't the model, aren't the framework we need to be thinking about. I mean, wow, was that, as they call it, a thought grenade or not? You have a concept that you call resonant. So let's just start in practice. What does that mean for studios?
We've been so focused on relevance in the 90s, 2000s. Because you clicked on this, you should also like this. And we've all had enough experience now with relevance that we know that it's not that great. Um, you know, oh, you're a 50-year-old male. Here's things for other 50-year-old males. That's relevance. And so I think at the same time, we all know resonance because we've all felt it before. One thing I think, the chills is something that we don't talk enough about in society. Like we've all had it, where that song, that game, that moment, you get the chills and you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now we're talking about resonance. We're talking about something that is connecting to who you are. It's a thing in the environment. It's a noun. It's a person, place, or thing that's
Hmm.
happening. And then there's you, which is your psychology, your cognition. And then the in between thing of those two things connecting, that's resonance. And the outcropping, the off gas of resonance is endurability. So one way to know that something resonates with you, it's something that you usually want to keep in your life. You're like, I'd like to keep this thing around, this person, this place, this thing, this activity.
Hmm.
That's something that resonates with you. So when we measure resonance at Solston, whether it's a game feature, whether it's a game, whether we're doing concept testing, go to market testing, we do this for so many great game developers. And we see these games go to market and become successful because we're measuring resonance. What we're actually measuring is this resonating with people right now? And that's important because when I was at Big Fish, a lot of the games, this was like 2016 to 2018 is when I was there, we would build games to my major displeasure off of who else is popular right now and making money. And it's like, if that feature already exists and that feature is already out there, that means it's already in the paradigm. And if
Yeah.
you want to create something that is going to be resonating with somebody, that they're going to enjoy, that they're going to love, you can't just go copy something that already exists. They've already consumed that piece of reality. And so if we want to create resonance, the best way to do it is to start from the person, understand who they are, and then let the artist breathe from there. And that starts with the other, knowing who they are, to let your own creativity really breathe and explore.
For so many developers, it starts with, I have an idea. I think this is cool. Um,
Yeah.
and if I just make it good enough, people will come with me. And the reality I think we're seeing in 2024 is the games market is vast, and there are almost not quite an infinite number of niches. But within that, you have to be credible, you have to be real, you have to be connected to your players,
Yep.
and all of your players, not, as you say, the niche within the niche. Um, so this is making a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, or not just the people on Discord, because we'll hear that too. Oh, we know our players so well. We talk to them all the time. It's like the people that use Discord are such a niche group of people still. So it's still not your audience. But yeah, that's exactly it, Brian.
So I have just, as of yesterday morning, relaunched the Discord channel for the whole of the games community in Scotland, and it's already turning factional. The clan wars are back. So I absolutely hear you. I thought, we'll do this, we'll bring this together. But the number of people who have turned around to me and said, "What's Discord?" I'm like, "It's Slack but dark," and they've gone,
Yep.
I don't like the sound of that. So yeah, I take your point entirely.
I want to get to how to use resonance to stand out. You've worked with so many different studios, Joe, and more coming. Tell me a little bit about how you help them improve how they resonate to ultimately retain.
I think, just to piggyback on what Brian said too, I think what the gaming industry is waking up to is that it's actually a competitive industry now. So when I was at Big Fish back in those days, I'd always joke, like I was like, you could say, hey, merge games are popular. What are also popular? Dragons. Let's make merge dragons. And players just didn't have like enough, they're like, well, that sounds cool. I'll play that game, because there's just not a lot of games out there. And what we're going to actually see is the cost of building games is going to continue to decrease. The amount of human beings are naturally creative, and human beings naturally like to play. Like, play is not reserved for gamers anymore. There's 3.4 billion people in the world that play games now. Only 6 billion people have smartphones. We're going to see that number increase. There's going to be a point where everybody in the world plays a game in some way, shape, or form. And as people do that, they're also going to want to create games. And we saw that in the music industry already. Right now, I think there's about 200,000 songs a day that get released in like Spotify or iTunes. So it's really hard now. If you want to have a hit song, you can't just go, oh, we're top thing on Spotify anymore, or we're on TikTok and we got no. It's much harder than it used to be, and we're going to see that same trend happening in gaming, because human beings love to create. And with the onset of AI is going to bring up the baseline significantly. So the bottom level of stuff is going to come up. What AI has a really hard time doing is what humans are good at, which is finding the far-reaching, far-away connections that don't seem to relate to each other. But a human being can make that work, and then it becomes really interesting. So there's going to be more room than ever at the top, which is going to be good for players, good for gamers. And so that being said, when you go to build a game today, you can't just go into it saying like, hey, this is really fun for me, because there's a bunch of other people out there now that are making games, Electronic Arts, Activision, Supercell, Epic, that are using companies like Solsten, that are starting with their audience, who also have people that are passionate, creative, no one's special, that are just as creative as you, that are just as good as you, and they're using Solsten from the start. And so they're going to have a huge advantage. And we also have a lot of small game companies that are using Solsten from the start too. And I think so how do we do it? So when people start with us, we start with the audience. So you have an idea, amazing. Who is the audience for that? What do you know about them? Is it interest categories? Is it demographics? What can we start with? So Solsten, over the past 7 years, we psychologically evaluate people through a questionnaire in a game. So like when you're playing, let's say Heyday, your Supercell player, a pop-up happens and it says, we want to improve this experience for you. People take that questionnaire, Then we use our AI that we built before AI was popular. That basically, it's think of it as like a cognitive behavioral model. So play behavior is the most accurate behavior on the internet at predicting your psychology, much more than anything else. It's play behavior is like gold. Your insurance data, your credit card spending data is maybe like bronze. Your social media data is like garbage from a signal to noise ratio. So that's part of why Meta wants to get into gaming, because they know that the signal to noise ratio from how you play, back to the show me how you play and I'll tell you who you are, it's much more accurate. So we're able to take, our model is able to take that data for people that didn't take the questionnaire, and we can understand their psychology to an extent. Depends on the game, how, where it's better, where it's worse. And what we're able to do and have done from that is we build the largest psychological database in the world. So it's a living, breathing thing. If you go to navigator.solsten.io, that's in our beta right now. We haven't indexed it on the internet, but you can literally search it. There's over 200,000 people, like games represented. So that means people that have, or audiences that have played those games and have said, like, I play these games. There's a ton of interest categories, like 30,000 brands. So, I mean, one of our advertisements to the world going into next year is your competitor is probably going to know your audience better than you if they're using Solsten. And so we released that. We're releasing that to the world. That's a big paradigm shift, because a lot of companies, not just game companies, think, hey, I own my customer. This idea of owning your customer, it's such a false thing, because players, customers, we're omnivorous. We consume different products, different games. No, we own ourselves. Like we do that. And so Solsten is basically allowing anybody to understand any audience. And so with that database that we have, when you start building your experience, we launch an audience. We call that a navigator audience. You're going to see the different personas in it, but you can segment it to no end. So you can say, actually, we're really focused on an MMO game just for women who are just Gen Z. And when I hit that segment button, what our program will do, what our software will do, is we'll say, actually, we found 3 different psychological groups or 8 different psychological groups. So it refactors every time you segment, and it finds the different psychological groups of people. It knows their market size, how many people in the world are like them. It knows their average spend. So from the start, we have to start thinking this way now that we're in a red ocean. Your ideal player profile. Who is the ideal player profile that I want to go after when I'm building? Everybody does it in every other industry. And gaming has been able to be niche enough where it was pretty hard to build games, like in the early 2000s to, it got easier and easier, but it was hard to do. And there just wasn't a lot of competition. Now it's getting easier to do and there's more competition. So we have to start thinking about audience. Now, once you have your audience, you're going to be able to see, out of hundreds of psychological traits, you're going to be able to see what traits are the highest for your ideal player profile. So think of it more as less data is better. And those are the types of things that, if you're a developer, it makes it kind of easy. I think the global creative director at Zynga recently got back to us. He's like, this is just, it makes my job so easy, because I can use my own creativity, but now I know the direction where I'm pointing it. So now when I'm creating, I know who I'm creating for. And then what we call resonance testing, which it kind of comes down like concept validation. What we're doing that along the journey. So while the person's developing features, mechanics, we're doing play tests. And what's nice about that is we call it our typing tool. So when we're doing the play test, you can actually map back the people that are in the test to the different personas, the different psychological groups from that market audience. And I kid you not, like, we've had play tests before where every single person in the play test was the smallest part of the market, the smallest persona. So it doesn't matter what you're getting from that play test, because you're going to design yourself into a really niche space.
Lots of small studios are thrilled with loyal players in the niche, but you understand what you're going for and you understand what the trade-offs are.
I think this is the thing, Peggy. We have tools out there now which can do all the competitive analysis in the world. The different business models, the different events, the different ways in which you introduce new content, the content scheduling. You can pick apart successful games in almost every degree, but then replicating them or copying them or iterating on them is fine. But as Joe has just said so beautifully, unless you know who you're doing it for and how they're going to engage with you, then it's a shot in the dark. And so few companies can afford that shot in the dark. Um, and just to pick up on something that you said, Joe, is the success at scale. You know, we get so many questions coming in, not just in the podcast, but on the Pocket Gamer site about why games are cancelled so early, or games that are in early release or only available in small regions. Why are they closed down before we get a chance to see them? And it's because they're not succeeding at the scale the companies need.
I mean, it's almost as if you could have, if they would have gotten to you earlier, then they might not have closed down.
Yeah. I mean, that's, and this comes from you guys, there's a PGC article, but it's something like 84% of games in the first 3 years end up failing. So end up being shut down. And then in that same article, it says something like 40% of games, to your point, Brian, don't even make it to daylight. And one of the advantages of a studio is like if a game's not working, you want to kill it as fast as it can so you can reallocate those resources onto a game that can work. And so what we did is we looked back, hey, in the last 7 years, out of all the game companies we've worked with, and we've worked with like a lot of great startups all the way to all the big names. And we look at all the games that have been developed as Solsten from the start. Like Merge Mansion is a great example. We started with them when they were like nothing, like tiny, 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 like thousands of players. And if you look at all these types of games that started really, really early on as an idea, use Solsten through that process, it's something like 74% of those are still in the market and making money 7 years later. So, like, at the very minimum, Solsten is an insurance policy. And I'd even go as far as to say, understanding your audience psychologically and testing against that is an insurance policy. And maybe a good story there is like Monopoly Solitaire. Mobilityware makes the largest solitaire game in the world. I think it's Spider Solitaire. And they came to us and said, like, hey, we're thinking about different IPs. Would Monopoly be a good one? I don't know. Well, let's launch the solitaire audience. We launched it. We looked at all the personas. The second highest LTV persona, not the first, but it was the second largest market size. So it's still a big market size. Their second, back to seconds, their second favorite IP was Monopoly, not their first. The first one they didn't have access to. But we said, yeah, I think Monopoly is actually a really good idea. We didn't think it was going to be that high, but the IP was high. That's kind of a first step to building towards the market. And then the second step, when they were building it, they were asking themselves, how much Monopoly versus how much solitaire? And actually teams had different ideas. So there was two major hypotheses on that. And both teams felt very passionate because gamers are passionate. They felt very passionate about what was there. And we said, let's just test it against the market. And there's one that won, which was a little less popular internally. But then when it went to market, now Monopoly Solitaire is Mobilityware's second highest grossing product that they have. That's enabled to help them get through this period of like where all these layoffs were happening with game companies. Yeah, it's been difficult for them, but we didn't hear about Mobilityware because that's what gets you when you pay attention to the market and you build things based on the market. And I want to add the fact of what a lot of game companies don't talk about right now is because we're a more mature market, we're in a red ocean now, is switching costs. Switching costs are very real now. That's another thing that every other red ocean industry knows very well. If I'm in Roblox and there's a new game and it's really cool and I start playing it, it can't just be better than Roblox. It has to be 10 times better than Roblox because I have to convince all my friends of all the stuff that they've done and built. I have to convince them to go to this new space because when we in the entertainment industry we're competing on people's time, and people's time is their most valuable resource. And what we're seeing is an increase in a trend of depth of experience. People just don't want, they want something they can sink their teeth into and play it over time. We're seeing this with players. We measure something called long-term orientation, and it's actually increasing in human beings in general, meaning people care about, hey, if I play this game and it's 30 days from now, is it still going to be interesting to me? Because I want to spend time in the game. I want to build up a world. I want to build up my character, etc. Is that still going to be a place I want to spend time in? So this is how players are thinking more and more and more. And so when you build something, is it enduring? And of course, what that means is more enduring experiences will be built. EVE Online is one, Roblox is one, Fortnite is one. Those are enduring experiences. And then if you're competing against those, to your point, Brian, your job as an entrepreneur isn't to build something that already existed. It's to figure out where are people going in the world and meet them there. So you have to look at audiences, you have to understand groups, where are they going? And I'm creating for them for where they're going. That's how Roblox got to be where it's at. Roblox didn't say, what's that game that we should copy their features from? They said, well, where are things going? And let's build something for where people are going. And then you get Roblox.
What is it that I'm actually bringing in order to unlock this superpower that Solsten gives me in understanding my audience? You do have your questionnaires and you do have your AI and your evaluation and assessment of those answers, but do I have to come with my own player database, my own data? I mean, how am I actually making certain that what you're finding out about what audiences love is also what's going to transfer over to my audience, my game, my world?
Yeah. So I think what's important is Solston is we've really pioneered. We're the first. We have all the patents on it to use AI for predicting human psychology. So we're not a gaming company. We're a human understanding company, and that's what we came out of. And I think that's what's important is we're not doing Bartle types. We're not doing Myers Briggs. We're not doing player classification. A lot of times when people talk about player motivations, what they're talking about is extrinsic motivators. This player is motivated by adventure. This player is motivated by completionism. There is nothing in the psychological literature that says adventure is a psychological trait. But if you look at human psychology, that's what we're actually measuring. So it doesn't matter if you're building a game, like understanding the human psychology is the enduring part about that person. And what you need to show up with starting to work with Solston is an idea. So there's a lot of really good ideas. Like Tesla had a lot of really, really, really good ideas, but not all those ideas were ideas whose time has come. And so with Solston, you can say, hey, I'm thinking about making this specific game. And we can build an audience off of that. So, well, okay, it's these features, it's this genre. Because what we're doing within our database is we have millions and millions of people who have filled out, like, basically really precise, complete psychological assessments. So we're adaptively learning about them. We use machine learning to do this. And then we have a full psych profile. But then we ask like survey questions like, what are your favorite games? What are your favorite movies? What are your favorite TV shows? All this other kind of stuff. So we're able to pull that data in. So if you're like, yeah, it's going to be like kind of a cross of Valheim meets Candy Crush. I don't know. Like whatever your crazy idea is, we can take that. We can go, well, let's look at the Valheim players that also play match 3 games. We can see if that market is there, if that market is big enough, or if it's growing, because maybe it's really small but we're actually seeing month over month because maybe in 2 years it's going to grow into being a big enough space that we can actually bring people in. So showing up with an idea is where you start. And then if you already have a live game, well, that's easy because so we have 2 products. Navigators, our database. Traits is our, think of it as like kind of a dumbed down version of the Matrix where we're understanding your audience in real time. And then you can use our API to do player matching, to do personalized recommendations. Hey, I'm sending out an offer. This offer goes to all the people that are above 90 on altruism. Buy this sword and help your friends. Same offer, it goes to all the people that are high in dominant competition. Buy this sword and crush your enemies. And if we look at day 0 through day 7 of a game, a lot of what we're seeing right now is a big move towards personalization. Like the best in the industry are talking about it. And if you really want to get your day 7 retention up, like we did this with Heyday. Heyday, pretty old game, Supercell, like it's done well for them. Literally got their day 7 up significantly. I think it's like 20 something percent. We have a case study you can find on the website. But the person was running, he's like, you guys literally got Heyday back on the map at Supercell. That's just one little thing that we did. There's so many things you can do.
Well, the good news is, Brian, what I heard from all of that is that because I was worried, I thought, oh, I've got to have this massive database and my statistically significant stuff, which for an indie is like, it's not going to happen. The good news is I have an idea, I have a concept, I have a grasp maybe of my existing game, and I can come over and I can match that very intelligently. So that's good news. That's democratization.
When I see games that are built for 1, 2, 3 years and then fail, it hurts because I'm like, that is a loss of that brilliance, of that creativity that the world will never get to see. And one of our passions at Solsten is making sure that even the smallest teams have a way for that to be able to be seen. So we listened. We're also releasing, because Solsten's kind of sometimes unaffordable if you're not a venture backed startup. So we're actually releasing a more affordable version of our product next year that even like indie groups that might not have as big a budget would be able to start to access this. So yeah, democratizing the ability to understand audience. But let's be really fair. Like Matt Strite, who's shout out to Matt. He's also making a new game. Matt was at Solsten for a while. Matt used to be the head of research at Scopely. He built that team up. He was at Activision. We started working with Matt really early on, and this guy's, PhD psychology, as sophisticated as I think you can kind of get in the gaming industry. He used Solsten to success. Actually, ended up coming over to Solsten. He's like, I need to work with you guys. And someone asked him, was like, hey, Matt, would you do things, knowing what you know now, would you do things at Activision the way we did them before Solsten? And Matt said, yes, absolutely, if I wanted to be miserable. And so he's got a beautiful dry sense of humor. If you know Matt, this is a great guy. But that being said, if you look at the big guys too, we're here as a solution for them all the way down. Like we work with a lot of middle tier, like Tilting Point type groups as well, all the way down to startups of 5 to 7 people. Because there's games will always fail, but it's just so cool to prove out the fact that once you have that brilliant idea and know your audience and who you're making it, the brain has this amazing thing that it does, that when you know the end point, when you know where you're going, it makes it very easy for the brain to fill in all the gaps. But if you don't know who you're going to or where you're going, it's very hard. It can wander and go different places. So we just hope to provide that of, this is the audience today, and you guys are the creatives, and we're just here to help you hit the mark when it goes to market. And then after it goes to market, we're here to help you grow it based on who they are and personalizing things for them.
And making it affordable. That is really, really something.
I'm going to take the role of the bewildered developer, which I do very well, Joe. So, for a lot of developers, it's until they have a vertical slicing, until they have a demo, until they have something running, it tends to be very, very internal. Where should companies be talking to you, thinking about this kind of thing? It seems to me that it's before you commit a single line of code, at the design stage. Am I off base here?
Yeah, the sooner the better. So the moment you have an idea, I'll use Christian as an example again, where Christian Segershaw is like, I got 5 ideas. That's the point, because that's where we can build up those audiences and have a look at them together and have an honest look. Because once you, as a developer, once you cognitively commit to an idea, that's where your brain power is going. You're thinking of, you get all these amazing ideas, what you can do, what world you can build, what you can create, what's the art style, what's the theme. And we all know this, our brain is the most expensive organ that we have. It's burning more glucose than anything else. So that's important. So when we want the brain directed at something, we want it directed as early as possible at something that has the highest likelihood of reaching reality. And then along that as well, it's not too late as well. If you pull us into the journey, you're mid development, you have a prototype, something like that, because there's still things that, we've seen. We had one, it was a social feature where that game happened to have its ideal player profile was off the charts on competitiveness, but also on collaboration, and it was specifically independent competitiveness. So a little tweak in that feature where if your team lost and like your team just bombed it, you still got heavily rewarded if you performed very well in relation to everything else. That wasn't even on the roadmap. It wasn't thought of. When they actually released that, it performed incredibly well. It was is a retention feature, etc. So it's not too late as well. The thing is, what you're designing to is, the later you start working with Solsten in the process, the more you might be subject to a local maximum. So you might have made design decisions that are like, ooh, that, You know who resonates with that decision is like the third biggest persona in your market. So now where our market size is a little bit smaller, but hey, maybe it's still a viable market for you, but we just know we're not maybe hitting that bigger one. And maybe sometimes that's a conscious choice too. You're like, nobody's making games for this persona right now. We're an only 10-person studio. We want to have this as our, proof of point, kind of proof point, and we're going to get this game out and then we're going to go do the big one. So it allows you to actually be way more empowered of your ship as a person running a game studio or as a developer, because you're making decisions based on the reality of the market, because our database is literally representative of 3.4 billion people. Our assessment is in Japanese, it's in Chinese, so we literally are measuring the world. There's something called the state of the player that we release. Last year was the first year. Next year, so early next year, we'll have the new one, and it will compare how have players changed from 2023 to 2024, because we're literally measuring globally these audiences. And I think, one person joked and they're like, you just should call it like the state of humanity, because that's kind of what it is. It's like we found in the last one, for example, that one of between COVID and after COVID, the one personality trait that's changed the most among humanity was actually altruism. People became more altruistic after the pandemic. So sometimes bad things beget good things. But that was really interesting to see.
I love it. The state of humanity. I was looking at the report. I won't geek out and go into the data points, but it was eye-opening, and it's fascinating how what we value comes through in the gameplay. What we value in life, we value in the game.
I mean, we talked about altruism, earlier. If I tell someone, hey, your audience is in the 99th percentile globally for altruism, like rather than saying what features should we make next, if I'm a game developer, my brain's on fire right now. I'm thinking about what are all the things we can do in the game where people can help each other out, have the opportunity to help. And now I stack traits. We call this trait stacking. The more high scoring traits for your audience that the better off you are. So let's say you know that your audience is in the 99th percentile for being altruistic as a human being. This is not how they play, this is who they are. So that's an off gas of that. And so if I know that, and then I also know, what, they're also in the 97th percentile globally for, let's say, individualism. So now that's interesting. Okay, so they want to achieve things by themselves. They're individualistic, they're goal oriented. So, how can I have helping behavior in a way that actually highlights their individualism? And now you start stacking that, and now you end up with a feature or mechanic, and someone goes, I've never seen anything like this before. Yeah, because you didn't copy somebody, you literally just made it for your audience. And so, yeah, that's, authentic data. We are no When we play, we are the most authentic version of ourselves. And what's so fascinating is there's no other industry that people answer psychological assessments more accurately than in the gaming industry. And I think what I would want to say too about authentic data is, if you look at, like, we started talking to like BMW, for example, and Porsche and MasterCard, like these kind of companies. And a lot of the outside world, like, they send out surveys all the time. So take this paid survey and tell me about yourself. Well, nobody who drives a Porsche is going to take a $5 60 question survey. Like, that's just not going to happen. But that same person who drives a Porsche also might play Fortnite, and they're going to take a survey where they maybe get a free thing in the game, or we don't always reward, but sometimes we do, probably 50-50, because they want Fortnite to be better for them, because they really care about that Fortnite experience. And then Solsten also knows, because we asked, what are your favorite brands? And maybe they said Porsche. So we can go to Porsche and be like, yeah, we have tens of thousands of people in our database that are also Porsche drivers. And the whole idea that there's gamers and not gamers, that's not true anymore. It's like, people are players. So when we look at data as a whole, we capture data at the point of authenticity. That's part of why gaming is so important to us and why we're so passionate about gaming and play and what we do here. I mean, that's part of my personal story too. But then if we're enabling, consumer insights, from beyond, we're also saying we're capturing data at a point of authenticity, not at a fake point of, here's $5 for a 60 question survey that a person's going to kind of lackadaisically take. And also, the people that actually might be your buyers I've never taken a $5 consumer insight survey.
I just want to interject for one moment because you've got me thinking, because that's the other topic going forward is brands in games and getting those worlds together. And you, Brian, you've got some great ideas about how this goes beyond games. It's in everything. So the play in the game goes to rest of world, whether it's commerce or everything. But for you, is that part of the end game, pun intended, I guess, for you, Joe? Because you can bring those worlds together better than I think they can themselves.
So again, it's in beta, but if you go to navigator.solsten.io, I
Yeah.
think it's going to get released next week. You'll be able to go into any game and you'll literally be able to see the brands that overlap with your game and how many
Wow.
millions of people overlap with that brand. You'll be able to
Wow.
see interests, brands, movies, TV shows, IPs.
What are you
So,
gonna
because
do with all that, Joe? I mean, you're sitting on a treasure trove. You can
Gold
almost
mine.
own the world with that. We can go visit you on your island next
yeah, I
time.
don't,
I mean, this is
I'm,
something.
yeah, maybe a ski hill or a mountain. I'm more of that
Ski
kind.
or a mountain.
I'm that kind of guy.
We'll go to your mountain.
I'm not one of those island weirdos.
Okay,
So more of
Come
definitely
a
a
come to
mountain man.
Scotland. Come to Scotland. It's covered in mountains. Covered.
well. This I would like if they had snow. That's so I know
They got it.
it's a little wet sometimes, but if I can ski on it, I'm there, Brian. So
Okay. We'll see what we can do after the recording session.
but yeah, that's awesome. And with brands and that's part of our niche is we know that transmedia is not just it's a very real thing and it's only going to increase. Like we did something with Kaufland in Germany. It's a big grocery store. So they are looking at what games overlap with people that like and go and shop at Kaufland. They did a partnership with Roblox, for example. So we're able to see like what are the top games that overlap because what brands are starting to become very intelligent and smart about is the fact that mind share and screen share, gamers are just way more into the game than they are the TV show, the movie, or the billboard for that example. So if you're a brand and you're looking at your transmedia opportunities, games are a very, very good place to go. And the fact of the matter is, as we talked about this whole show, is games are really, really hard to make. So if you're McDonald's and you're like, our McDonald's team made a game, nobody cares. Like, unless it's better than Roblox or it's better than Fortnite or it's better than insert name of really good game, the mind share is not there. It's a waste. It's a interesting marketing effort. People are going to see it and go. And as a brand, what people want to be is top of mind. It's something like Gartner came out with this report saying that 78% of consumers in the next 8 years are going to quit one of their favorite brands. So consumer trust is at an all-time low. People don't trust brands anymore. And that's brands need to get their trust up because that's literally what a brand is. It's trust. And so people are quitting brands at unprecedented rates. We know Gen Z more than ever is quitting brands. And so people are not thinking of brand as an opportunity, but as a risk now. And so how can I take where there's mind share? I can go into Solsten, see what games, so the other way around, what games overlap. And then as a game developer, I can also go to what brands and we can cut deals and actually have really good opportunities together because as a gamer, I'm more empowered now to drive revenue because I can go to them and say, yeah, hey, according to Solsten, you guys are the number one brand that our players are overlapping with. And if you guys want more mind share, we can think of really interesting ways to incorporate your brand.
I am blown away that we'll be able to make that match between games and brands, and that's just going to be the start because you're absolutely right. How we play is who we are. And if you want to connect with consumers, no matter what the offer is, understanding me, understanding the real me, that's going to make that connection. You have such an exciting time ahead of you, Joe.
It's been a lot of grinding for 7 years. It's been a
Yeah.
lot of I was on a podcast with Mark Randolph, the Netflix co-founder, and the podcast is called That Will Never Work. And we talked about that was the stage of Solsten where that's all I was being told, and I think it's when you create something that is new, that's what you're just going to hear all the time. And you just got to really want to create it. Like, it's there, you believe in it. Something I tell our team is like, if you're in the desert and some you clearly see somebody that's thirsty, they need water, things are not going well for them. We're coming full circle back to the wilderness first responder now. And you
Yeah.
go up to them and things are not going well and you need to render aid. And you say, I have, and you have a lot of water. You're going on excursion, you were ready for the desert, and you try to give them some water and they hit it away from you. Like, you're not just gonna go, oh, they didn't want it, gonna go walk the other direction. You're gonna be like, I'm gonna give this person water until they start to come to and start to become better and become okay. Because you know the value of water. Like, you understand that if you're in the desert and you're trying to give that person water, how valuable it is. But they might have been in the desert so long that they're hallucinating and it doesn't matter anymore. And I think that's just the message in general. If you know what you have can really have value for people and add value to people, you just got to keep going. So we're super excited for what's happening now in the markets and where things are coming to, and what we've built and what we've done. I think we're excited to see the kind of brand transmedia thing play out, because I think it's going to be really good for consumers, game developers, and brands. And maybe just a shout out, my co-founder Bastian Bergman, who is our COO. Bastian did a book deal with Harvard Business Review. So the book's written, it's being published, I think next year, early next year, but it's on brands and games. So how that whole world happens.
Peggy and I have been doing this for a while, not the podcast, but I remember, I think the first time I met Peggy was at the Business Design Centre in Islington
Mm,
in London, at one of
Yes.
the very early Mobile Entertainment Forum events, where we were still trying to persuade the games world that mobile phones were a worthwhile thing to be paying attention to, and the telecommunications industry that games were something that they should be putting alongside stocks and shares and weather reports. And it's fair to say the skepticism on both sides was healthy. So I absolutely feel where you've been. You know, it's Peggy and I have seen
yep.
this,
Oh yeah.
and so take it from a couple of people who have been there. I think you're in a good place.
Thank you. Yeah, we think so too. It's when Naveen Jain, who was a friend while I was living in Seattle, said something to me that, like, I really appreciated when we were talking about this, because we were trying to raise money back then and it was very, very early. And one of the things he said, Joe, if you have an idea and 50% of all the VCs that you talk to think it's a really, really good idea, it's not a good idea. He said that's a multi-million dollar company at best. And he said, if you have an idea and 99.5% of all the VCs think it's a horrible idea, but 0.5% of the VCs that are the closest to your niche and what you're doing think it's a really good idea. He said, that's $1 billion company. And I know because I've built one before. And so that was kind of a funny Naveen Jain anecdote or moment. Like, he's a great guy. But that, I think that was really true for Solsten. Is we saw a lot of companies in 2018 when we founded it. 93% of all venture-backed companies that were founded in 2018 are now gone. They had to go through COVID. They had to go through a bank failure like we did with Silicon Valley Bank. They had to go through a lot, and it's really hard to survive. There's no book for how to survive a global pandemic as a venture-backed company from 2018, and you have to go through a lot of challenges. And I think one of the things that did keep us alive is being that smaller percent that was willing to go through a lot of rejection early on. And one of our very, very first investors was one of the Supercell co-founders. He was an angel in Solsten, and he got it. He was like, "Oh my gosh, if we would have had this when we were making Clash of Clans, this would have made my life so much easier." So, those are the signals that you want, early on. Okay, somebody who's in it, niche, been successful, in venture, led our seed round and our Series A. Tuomas, who's the partner there, Tuomas was the CFO of Rovio. So he got it. He'd been in that same space. He saw everything that Angry Birds went through. So yeah, I think it's, early on, when you know something, you know it, and it's important not to let other people, I think deter it. But now, to your point, Peggy, with the market,
This is
now
it.
we're now our timing is back there. So for us, it was, we
Absolutely.
got to survive till this moment. We knew the moment was coming, but we didn't know when it would start to happen, and it's happening now, though.
And we have you on our show at this time when you have all of this news, all of these developments. I mean, the show notes are just going to be full of check out the beta here and do that there. I mean, wow. Have you been busy? And are we fortunate, Brian, really, to have him on the show?
Oh, listen, it's rare that we can say you heard it here first, folks. Um, and whether whether that's true or not, we will claim it. But Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have so many more questions, but I think that's going to have to wait for episode 2. So, Joe, before we let you go, and thank you so much for your time. I know that we've overrun significantly into your busy day, but we tried to bring everything back to the world of games before for all of our guests. So, we have 2 questions for you. One is, what are you playing right now? What's on your mobile? What's on your console? What's obsessing you? What are you spending time on when you should really be doing more psychological profiling? And then, secondly, what's your favorite game of all time? So, nice, simple stuff.
A lot of the games that I'd love to sink my teeth into, I just don't have enough time to do.
Mhm.
So what that means is
Oh,
it ends up
I hear you.
being more on the mobile side. A mobile experience that I've really enjoyed, but also think that there's a lot they could do to be more enduring is Souls. I think it's a really interesting game. I've definitely enjoyed playing it. So that's the more recent one. I don't know if you guys have checked it out, but it's Schaeppi. They have that Capybara game right now that I think is doing also really well. So yeah, I've enjoyed Souls. And then all time, I mean, that's tough. Probably Ocarina of Time, Zelda. It's
Oh,
probably
yeah.
Okay.
N64. Yeah.
It's a strong contender. We have heard that one quite a lot, and it's up there for a reason. Well, Joe, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your enthusiasm, your passion, and for so much information. I think it's fair to say we're going to be giving the audience a lot to think about with this one, Peggy.
I'll hold you to it, Joe. We will share this with everyone so that they can get excited the same way that we are, and also be excited about what's next. There's a lot coming. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you both.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future.